Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Jonasz. A fragile truce entered into force between Russia and Ukraine to mark Easter holidays among Orthodox Christians, and seems to have been broken almost immediately, judging by conflicting reports from both sides. With Russia having an established record of failing to comply with its own undertakings, can Moscow's accusations be taken at face value in the present case? And how does it bode for a potential future peace deal, one whose outline remains vague after months of US brokered talks? Joining us here today is McNamee, co-founder of Ukraine Business News Network. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So first of all, let's begin with an update on the truce. It seems like it didn't really hold for that long.
Right, and this should come as no surprise to nearly anybody. If it had held, that would have been the surprise. This is something, and this is multiple years in a row, where the Ukrainian side has requested weeks in advance to conduct some sort of ceasefire of various length, which is delayed and it's sort of ignored by Russia. This year, Putin happened to agree, at least formally on paper, to do something for 24 to 36 hours. But of course, been violated, some 500 violations at a minimum by the Russian side. Of course, Ukraine retaliated to Russian ongoing attacks. But at the same time, there's some minimal positives to take from it. We did get a fairly large prisoner exchange, which is always positive news. Just the fact that there's still some talks, there's some mediation by the UAE and the US in helping arrange the prisoner exchange and helping getting some agreement by both sides, even though it didn't hold, of course, towards this 24-hour or so long ceasefire, is relatively positive news, at least sort of symbolically at the most. But frankly, that's about it. I mean, legitimately, in terms of long-term impact on peace talks or militarily, this is nearly irrelevant and actually maybe even negative, because this does give, obviously, this pause in hostilities. It does give the Russian side the opportunity to then, resupply, as the medium and long range supply chains have been hit so strongly the last few months. So this does give them a little bit of a breather to then help resupply the front and rearrange forces, reposition forces that maybe they couldn't have done otherwise.
So now let's clarify one thing. You said Ukraine retaliated to the strikes, and this was something that President Zelensky himself said would be the case if Russia violated the truce. He said basically that Ukraine wants this ceasefire to hold and will comply with it for as long as Russia does. But if Russia breaks it first, Ukraine will essentially act in a reciprocal manner.
Right, and they we believe to date. I mean, obviously this is ongoing as we speak. The initial reports are that Ukraine has fired back onto Russian positions, but most of this again are drone attacks. So Russia violated this with close to 400 drone attacks. Then there's artillery attacks as well, which, by the way, across the entire frontier, north to south, when you're considering all the way from near the Belarus border all the way down to the Black Sea, these are violations. But this is still a reduction in the level of hostilities. But regardless, the point remains: this is a violation of the supposed 24-hour truce. And yes, Ukraine, of course, I mean, in defense of themselves, naturally have responded. To what degree, it's unclear. We'll find out in the coming days how many attacks, what did Russia actually do and where, and how much did Ukraine retaliate. But they're allowed to, of course, respond in defense of their territory being attacked and this truce being breached, of course, by the Russians.
And if Russia used drones, then it sounds rather deliberate. I mean, if there were shots fired, let's say, in the trenches, on the front line, you could always say, well, this was an honest mistake. Someone mistook some movement for an enemy unit, crossing the line, started firing. But drones are fired from dozens, if not hundreds of kilometers away. So that actually would imply that Russia had all the intention of breaking this truce.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, these are done by drone operators. They're done in coordination with other units. They assuredly planned for this, to conduct these drone operations knowing, or at least in the hope, that Ukraine would, for some brief period of time, be a little bit more relaxed in their defenses, or maybe trying to implement a truce, and so not on the offensive at that moment, at a minimum. So they clearly did this with the intention to break the truce, at least certain units there. And of course, these aren't just single rogue drone operators. This is done with coordination and command and control, particularly when you're talking about as of us speaking now, the latest reports, as of about 30 minutes ago, was about 400 some drone attacks. And those are the ones that we know of that were reported, of course. So assuredly that number is higher. That number is going to assuredly get much higher during this supposed truce period today. So yes, of course. I mean, as always, Russia's not, it's abundantly clear for 4 years. It's abundantly clear for the past year. Russia is not negotiating in good faith, period. And this is just the latest iteration today, speaking here on April 12th, that Russia yet again is not negotiating in good faith, and they have little reason to. There's very little pressure coming from the West in general or from the United States to do so, and so they can do these types of things with impunity.
Now, to the average person looking at this, it could actually be that, when someone is trying to take a glance at the situation, seeing what is happening, it makes up for a rather bleak outlook on the peace talks. I mean, you've mentioned prisoner exchanges, and that obviously is a positive, but it seems to be the only one. It seems like the negotiations are simply running in circles around a variety of issues that have been around from the very start, including Russia's exorbitant demands. They want to get control of the entire Donbass region, which they couldn't possibly conquer within the next year, even longer. They just want Ukraine to give it up. So do you see any sort of progress being made, or are these negotiations simply stalling, also because of what's happening in the Middle East and the US being distracted by that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll phrase these negotiations as we've told our clients here and investors in Ukraine. These are not Ukraine-Russia peace talks. These are U.S. normalization talks with Russia. And unfortunately for Trump's purposes, Ukraine and Europe are in the way. And now Trump has launched this war of choice in the Middle East. And so now Iran is also in the way. So frankly, this is a lot of political theater is where these talks have developed, and what we should really summarize them as. And I say that in particular because, as I'm sure you're familiar, in the last couple of days with the lead for the talks on the Ukrainian side, spy chief Kirill Budanov, noted that there is some progress in the talks and was speaking quite optimistically about the talks quite suddenly out of nowhere, which, again, this is the political theater. This is the Ukrainian side playing the political theater. The Ukrainians, it gets to the question, why do the Ukrainians want to play along in such a way and try to cite optimism for the talks? And I think the fundamental answer there is that they believe it's better to have the West involved, have the United States involved in the talks, at least as a mediator, keeping this on the pages, the Ukrainian war, on the pages of newspapers back in the Western world and back in the United States, to keep, to avoid Ukraine from going so far on the back burner and becoming irrelevant in the national discourse in the Western world and in the United States in particular. That said, it also concerns me that if Budanov and the Ukrainian side are so interested in keeping the United States engaged in these talks, despite the fact that there is clearly no progress for now, we're approaching about a year and a half. We're clearly seeing United States not supportive of Ukraine and in some ways even supportive of Russia. Why would the Ukrainian side actually be so interested in trying to create this perception that the United States is engaged and we're making progress? And that's what concerns me. And I think the unfortunate answer to that is that it's possible that the Ukrainian side knows that should the talks formally fail and Trump and his administration, their efforts clearly being the failure that they are, Trump would punish one side or the other. And I think the Ukrainian side maybe is frightened that they would be the ones who would be formally punished. And punishment meaning Trump would stop selling weaponry to NATO allies and to Ukraine, which he's already done in response to Trump's perceived lack of support from European allies, NATO allies, with the war in Iran.
So you've mentioned that in some cases there is a perception that the US is actually closer to Russian interests than the Ukrainian ones. Is it simply because there is this concept that was introduced a while ago of, pulling a reverse Kissinger on, the Russian-Chinese alliance, of trying to get Russia out of Beijing's loop? In order for that, for Russia at least to remain out of a possible conflict over Taiwan in the Indo-Pacific. Is there anything else to it? Because some people say, well, okay, but if this is so, then the US has also weakened Russia by going against Iran, which has been a regional ally. Venezuela, to some extent, followed a similar pattern. There are threats being made against Cuba. Russia is already saying will not be pushed out of the Western Hemisphere, no matter what the US does. So how does it all, is there any sort of major strategy, or is it simply like a haphazard approach of, trying to stop some conflicts, then solving other issues, but there being like no master plan to it all? What do you think?
Absolutely. No master plan, no strategy. That's abundantly clear. Trump has been president for over 5 years now, including his first term. He showed zero clear strategy in his first term in those 4 years, and now it's been over a year in his second term. And it's abundantly obvious that there's no master plan. He's not playing 4D chess. There's no art of the deal. There's no grand strategy. The only thing I would say, I wouldn't call it a strategy, is that yes, he most definitely, Trump and his administration, and we know this from his first term as well, is trying to do this reverse Kissinger and try to move, create fissures between Russia and China and bring Russia onto the West side in some way. I wouldn't even call this a strategy. I call this wishful thinking at best. This has been bound to fail from the start. It has not worked. There is 0% chance this could possibly work, frankly. But I do believe that is still what they're more or less trying, in lieu of the fact that they have no other real strategy to go towards. So then you have to look at what are the deeper motivations here, because this is not really working. So why does this remain the strategy? It's abundantly obvious it hasn't worked. And the answer to that is likely because Trump and the administration want investment deals with Russia. And that then leads to questions about why does Trump and likely his family, with Jared Kushner involved in the talks, Witkoff, his old golfing buddy from New York, why are they so deep involved in these talks and continuing to provide these concessions to Russia? Almost zero pressure on Russia, recently taking off the sanctions, energy sanctions on Russia. The most logical answer to that is politically wishing you can do a reverse Kissinger, but probably more accurately, beneath all of that, just trying to get big investment financial deals with Russia that would be mildly beneficial for the U.S. economy, but massively beneficial for Trump and his cronies.
A very quick question. We only have 1 minute. The elections in Hungary happening today, how they could influence Ukraine's situation?
Hopefully positively, assuming we do get the win, and we could get a super majority win based upon polling for the opposition party. So that should happen. But we have major concerns here regarding potential U.S. interference. How will Orban react after these losses? Would he try to cancel the elections even? Does he put himself in the place of the presidency so he can then sort of veto any laws that the opposition party, when they come to power, they try to put in? So this is something to be watching most assuredly. And this will be massively impactful for Ukraine if, assuming the polling is correct, we see the opposition party win, and then they would open up and unlock that $90 billion loan to Ukraine, which is absolutely essential for Ukraine's survival here.
Mark McNamee was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And I'm Jonasz Rewiński. You're watching TVP World. Please stay with us for more latest news, comments, and updates.